Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. Victor Henry versus Tony Gravely. This is a good battle between two tried and tested veterans with very similar records. 22-6 for Henry, 23-8 for Gravely. These guys, Gravely's been in there with plenty of killers. So is Victor Henry. Gravely's had a little longer UFC career. Victor Henry just 2 fights. But still, both these guys have had their share of moments already. Victor Henry had two polar opposite fights. The win over Raoni Barcelos was one of the best low-key debuts ever in the UFC. Really just an incredible debut. And Henry had, a lot of experience, obviously, coming into that fight. And he'd built a really nice resume. But Raoni was just supposed to crush him, really. Raoni was a gigantic favorite and still is a very respected fighter. But what Victor Henry did that night was get everybody's attention, mine included. So here he is, and he's coming off a loss to Rafael Assunção in the exact opposite fight, where it sucked a lot of the momentum out of his career, out of his sails, took the wind out of his sails, and gave Rafael Assunção another breath of fresh air. So fucking weird, the fight game, but either way, Victor Henry, that performance against Raoni Barcelos can't be forgotten. Even if you overlook it, you can't forget it. Tony Gravely, he's been a little hot and cold in the UFC, but he's fought some really good fighters. Javid Basharat isn't done establishing himself yet, but losing a decision to him probably won't be too much shame in that when the smoke clears. He did get finished late by Brett Johns, and Nate Maness took him out in round 2. Opportunistic finisher. He's just, Tony Gravely's a really good grinder who's not a good submission artist. He's got 3 subs in his 23 wins, and of his 8 losses, he's got 5 submission losses. They're all to really good fighters at the UFC level, or guys who would eventually make it there. Manny Bermudez, Patchy Mix, Pat Sabatini, Ricky Bandejas, whoever the fuck else, Brett Johns in the UFC. So he's it's his primary weakness, but it takes a certain class of fighter to exploit that. And it's not to say it's the only way to beat him. The other way to beat him is to pretty much win a decision. Win a decision against Tony Gravely, you have to outlast him. I do think you have to have a requisite level of wrestling. And even not to say you're going to win the wrestling battle early on, but still, kind of like Tybura did to Romanov, a requisite level of wrestling where you can win the fight down the stretch, by taking away his wrestling. And I do think Victor Henry's got that with Tony Gravely. And that's how I expect this fight to play out. Not that Gravely is going to be purely wrestling. He's actually one of those guys where you might be screaming at him to wrestle, because guys get away from their wrestling. But either way, I trust Victor Henry here. I trust him to outpoint Gravely on the feet and to overcome any wrestling and athletic advantage that he might be suffering early on. Henry's a guy never been finished. He's got 6 losses. They're all by decision. He's only lost to really good fighters, a lot of them, out east, in Asia over there. But either way, he's a guy that's just starting to establish himself over here in the UFC, and I think this is going to be a victory for him. I'm pretty confident he's going to take over this fight down the stretch and really start widening the gap, really start pulling away from Gravely towards the end of the fight. I like Victor Henry's work rate. I like his cardio. I didn't love that Assunção performance, but I really love the Raoni Barcelos performance. So I'm going with Victor Henry. I do think he'd probably win a decision, but I like his money line. Well, his money line can go in parlays, -140. And for a decision, +200. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.